Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to the Future of Cybersecurity panel. We have three very interesting individuals here. I'd like to start with a round of intros. So maybe Andrea, you'd kick us off here.
Hello, lovely to meet everyone. Thank you for having me. Feel like I've made it just on time.
Just about.
Yeah, I'm Andrea Guariglia. I'm an investor at Dawn Capital. I started out as a founder, went through the whole chaos of the early stages before spending some time in the complete opposite side of the world, the big enterprise world, at McKinsey, where I worked with big tech companies and big banks. In the last few years, I've been investing at Dawn. We do everything in B2B software, and a large portion of my time has been spent on cybersecurity. And it's an area which always brings me more joy and fascination, so very excited to chat about it today.
Brilliant, thank you. Next up we have Sebastian Hunte.
Hello, I'm Sebastian Hunte, Investment Director at Albion. I focus on our frontier AI deep tech opportunities, so I'm particularly interested in the kind of intersection of AI and cybersecurity.
Fantastic. And DC, you want to take us away?
Hi folks, my name is DC Cahalane. I am a venture partner at Sure Valley Ventures. We are a UK and Ireland venture capital fund. Before venture, I mean, 3 years of VC, I was 21 years a founder, exited 4 software companies, 2 in the US, 2 here. And I joined SVV because all the partners in SVV are exited entrepreneurs. And when the guys started the fund in 2017, they agreed they'd only invest in 2 things ever. One was AI and one was cybersecurity. So yeah, it's most of my day is living that world.
Fantastic. And my name's Andy Johnson. I'm the CTO of a venture-backed cybersecurity company called Theodosian. We do data-centric security, and we're approaching raising a seed round. I've been in cybersecurity about 13, 14 years, architecting very complex cryptographic systems. Been an entrepreneur all my life, had some very interesting successes, including one to a publicly traded company, along with some failures as well, which you actually learn a lot more from. But very heavy-hitting panel. I'm going to start off with our first question. So, cybersecurity is one of the most constantly funded VC sectors globally. Yet European companies have struggled to match the scale of certain global counterparts, such as the United States of America. So right now, there's currently around 75 cybersecurity unicorns globally, worth a combined $230 billion. Almost all of them, though, are American or Israeli. Europe and the UK account for fewer than 10 of those. So the question I want to put to the panel today is, are European founders just a few years behind, or are they building the wrong things for the wrong buyers, or is the system fundamentally broken itself? Sebastian, maybe you want to kick us off?
Sure, easy question to start. Well, I think
One word answer.
I think that's a microcosm of a wider startup ecosystem, right? Like Europe is behind in the startup race against the US. I think cybersecurity, like every other domain, requires nice synergies that kind of come out of pools of capital and talent that have themselves been built up. And you see that in Israel and you see that in the US, right? They're closer to the end customer. And so you get spin-outs and talent density that takes time for the UK and Europe to actually follow on. I think in the end, any company that wants to scale globally will be selling into the US and therefore should be focused on the US as a primary market as early as possible. It's much easier to win in the US and then come back and win in Europe than it is to win in Europe and then try to win in the US. But I do think that Europe is rapidly catching up. I think there's an ambition and understanding of the opportunity set here that, in the 5 years that I've been in VC, I think has changed. And I think we're in a paradigm shift as well, which is always useful, right? Like as AI agents, workflows, et cetera, start to come to the fore, there will be new winners, there will be new categories created, and that's the opportunity for new talent hotspots and densities to come up. So I don't think there's a structural challenge. I think it's actually an opportunity for Europe to catch up.
Yeah, I think when we've invested in a whole bunch of cybersecurity companies, and a lot of them, what you notice is when they get to scaling capital, a lot of the people who are coming in are not traditional general VCs. A lot of the people who come in are like very much like specialist cybersecurity investors. And yes, most of them are American or Israeli. And I think the reason behind that is because like cybersecurity as a subset of software is kind of high risk, if you know what I mean. Like you either win or you lose, both in terms of, you know, startups selling to a customer. You know, the consequences of the product not working is not, we lose a bit of productivity. It's quite serious. So I think for a lot of the challenges maybe that we had over the last 10 years was, it's a really difficult problem to solve. Requires really deep technical knowledge. And I think some of that really deep technical knowledge was probably missing, not in the founders, but in the investment circles themselves, you know, in terms of, you know, a European VC's ability to actually like due diligence investments and stuff. I think what I've seen in the last 2 or 3 years is the actual advent of AI has kind of put a lot of focus back on VCs to upskill, you know, their ability to do deep technical due diligence again. And I think cybersecurity then is benefiting from that, you know, because again, you know, cyber is benefiting a lot from the AI race at the moment. So I'd be the same as you. I don't think it's been like big structural things. It's just been the fact that like I'm from Cork in Ireland, a small town, 140,000 people. Our biggest employer is Apple. And then outside of that, the next 6 biggest companies are cybersecurity companies. We have 7 of the world's biggest cybersecurity companies have their European headquarters in a small little town. So it's not like they haven't been in Europe as an industry, but I think there was a gap in the technical level of understanding. Like you just didn't have a lot of funds who were into like really deep, nerdy, high risk reward cybersecurity stuff, which is something that they're really comfortable with in America and Israel.
Andrea, anything to add here?
Yeah, I totally echo the 2 angles of the framing. I think the one hand, there's the broader European startup scene, which we know where it's at. There's capital questions and so on. And then there's the technical, deep knowledge. And obviously, we know the US is far ahead. I think Israel here is the really interesting piece, because Israel, sure, has a fantastic startup ecosystem, but that's largely driven by cybersecurity. And I think it's driven because of a really, really deep focus from the government level. The military has incredible focus on cybersecurity. The talent pools that have been built there with incredible focus. And that means that when companies coming out of Wiz, coming out of Checkpoint, they know the right people to tap into. They understand the technical requirements to build a cybersecurity company, and that doesn't happen as often in Europe. And we have great successes in Europe as well, of course. We've got Darktrace, we've got Mimecast, one of Dawn's first investments 20 years ago. Often the best founders in Europe in cybersecurity are actually coming out of those ecosystems, those companies, and the more we can build those success stories, the more the ball will roll. So, yeah.
Can I actually just add to that, because I think you've raised a really important point, which is one of the things about Europe compared to, say, Israel, America, is like Israel, they decided to place one bet. I mean, I assume everybody had a few goes on the casino tables downstairs, and I guess, you know, Israel went to the roulette table and they stayed at the roulette table and they bet on cybersecurity. They create an ecosystem 100% focused on that. One of the things every country in Europe does is like they go wide. They try to make themselves an attractive environment for entrepreneurs to build anything. And I think that's, you know, in something as detailed as cybersecurity, I think that's why it's clear then, you know, America's scale works, Israel's focus works. You know, maybe part of the problem we have in Europe is like we just pick a few things that we think we want to be really, really good at, as opposed to being really, really good at everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Israel's a very concentrated market with cybersecurity, and a lot of the people I've met over my career, you know, obviously required to go in the military, built some very interesting technology and such an interesting concentrated pool of cybersecurity talent there. Andrea, next question for you. Where is the cybersecurity opportunity shifting to? And which subsectors are becoming commoditized, and which are entertaining a new phase of value creation?
Again, an enormous question, which is very exciting to tackle, because I meet incredible founders building new innovations in security every week. And sometimes I have no idea what's going on. And so the area is just full of innovation across all the different little pockets and subsegments. And for me, what's really important is always coming back to first principles. And for me, that's 3 domains. It's how you defend, how you respond to threats, and then how you verify. And for me, the kind of castle analogy is always the most valuable here. And I think there's opportunities across all of those. A big driver, as everyone in this room, of course, will be feeling, is AI and what that means for threats and how you respond to them as well. But if we go through those one at a time, for me, defend is all about how you lock your windows and doors, how you set up your defenses correctly. And for a lot of the technical estates, that's relatively mature. For the AI angle, that's not yet mature. You're seeing a lot of innovation around AI governance, around how you protect AI systems. But broadly speaking, the maturity across this is higher than the other 2. I think respond is where there's something really, really interesting because of the speed of AI attacks now and the speed at which AI attacks are changing. It means you have to be able to respond very quickly. And for me in the castle, that's your soldiers. That's how they run around and fix vulnerabilities and respond to attacks and fend off specific threats. And on the one hand, that's internal. How can you build up your security operations teams and systems to be more agentic, more automated, and prioritize more intelligently? There's incredible companies building in that space. Like in Europe, Kevlar out of Paris is doing this. And then you also have the speed at which you can respond to fast evolving threats. So the threat intelligence space is another one which is evolving really quickly. And then finally, if we go to the verification point, how do you make sure your defenses are robust? There I'm seeing incredible opportunities on AI pen testing. How do you combine humans and agents to make sure you're protected? I could go on for hours on this, but that gives a frame of how I think about where the opportunities are at the moment.
Interesting, yeah, very good business we use, Aikido actually, from Belgium, big success story in that space. Sebastian, next question for you. So the UK has always been home to the world-changing inventors and engineers. Innovations, developments in Britain have helped shape the entire world. As Jensen, CEO of NVIDIA says, he put it, the UK has one of the richest tech communities anywhere on the planet, the deepest thinkers, and the best universities. The UK has the largest cybersecurity talent pool in the whole of Europe and is a world leader in academic research in security and cybersecurity, but it has struggled to commercialize this at scale. Sebastian, help us break this down. What is blocking that pipeline, and what would unblock it?
So I think there's a number of angles there. I think there's a question mark around how we translate research from our universities more broadly than cybersecurity. So I think you should probably tackle it there and then think about the cybersecurity angle specifically. For me, that's lowering the barriers for researchers, PhDs, academics to spin out, having good policies in place for TTOs not to take too much equity, allowing universities to understand that they're better off supporting, a wider range of companies that succeed than trying to take a big share of a couple. I mean, frankly, most VCs can't even pick winners. So why would you expect a university to pick winners? So they should, I think, just benefit from the fact that, in the end, goodwill is goodwill, and the US has seen that, right, in their endowments and how Stanford's ecosystem has grown by successfully nurturing companies to go out, and then it returns dividends in the long term. I think for cybersecurity specifically, the closer you can get to industry, the better, right? So I think again, there's an isolation of our kind of academic institutions a little bit from industry. It's the same conversation we're having around why Israel is so good at this. But I think particularly as the attack surface shifts with AI, I think we do have one of the strongest research labs in the world, right, across our university base. I mean, DeepMind exiting to Google is a travesty for the UK, but that's something I will die on the hill of. And so I think we have and are at an inflection point where actually AI and cybersecurity are aligning, right? I think the question is often, we're seeing new attack surfaces like prompt attacks. Like you have to understand the model itself. It's not just a static, simple software that like you can actually view as a castle that's as if it's stationary, right? Like we need to be much more agile in thinking about it. And I think that's the best time for us to, in general, as UK and Europe, put a lot of intentional backing behind our research caliber.
So obviously there's a lot of interesting companies being born out of the DeepMind mafia, I guess one could call them. You just mentioned DeepMind there. Would you argue that sort of DeepMind, if it wouldn't have sold to Google, would it have had the success it's had in giving birth to these new generation of founders in the AI and cyberspace?
I mean, Google had the success of creating founders in Google, right? So like, once you can, assuming that DeepMind could have got the funding that they did and stayed independent and scaled, I mean, you look at what Google is building their products around in Gemini, and what they're putting their bets on, I'd say at least 50% of that comes from DeepMind. So if you had kept that and commercialized it, I mean, you know, you sit there as the CEO of DeepMind, it's an obvious, playing in Google is like having an infinite fortune to just do amazing R&D, right? So you can't really blame him. But I think, yeah, of course, he would have given enough capital and enough support. I think there's no reason to believe that, not to believe that DeepMind would have gone on to be an independent, massive company just like Google or any of the others.
And DC, where would you say the most urgent gaps are between what enterprises need and what the current vendor landscape provides? Which of those gaps represents venture scale opportunities for future founders?
Like I think if you're intellectually honest, it's a pretty easy scenario. Like I think for any of us who've ever worked in a big company, you know, unless you were working in cybersecurity in that company, you never thought about it. Like there was this assumption that somebody in the company was protecting the network, and because that was the primary role, right? It was to protect the network, protect the data. And as the guys have said, like that's not the game anymore. You know, now the attack surface has just increased so much. Now you've got prompt injections. Now actually like every single individual, you know, we all know the weakest part of any cybersecurity strategy is always the human being in the loop, you know, through phishing attacks and stuff. And now I think we have a scenario where the opportunity for phishing attacks, the opportunity for, you know, large-scale cybersecurity incidents to be caused by the humans in the loop is huge. So I think you're going to have to see, you know, as we all continue to use more and more AI agents, put more and more data into places it shouldn't be, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I think there's a huge opportunity in that space. If you can somehow, because, you know, right, there are tools there, but there are tools that will interrupt the workflows. You know, if you're working in marketing, you want to be secure, but you don't want to have to spend time thinking about it as you're working on your stuff every day. So I just think there's a huge opportunity for startups where to go looking at individual functions, individual workflows, you know, individual data sets within large organizations and try to work out, you know, can we, you know, to the idea of a castle, can we reinforce these areas to make them, you know, defensible again, you know? So I just think there's, you know, there's a lot of opportunity in that. And I mean, in most cases, you know, if you can become that security layer for, you know, a general layer like marketing or like sales or like finance or like operations or like manufacturing, like that is absolutely going to be venture scale and enterprise grade.
Interesting. The next set of questions, open debate. So anyone can go ahead and answer them. We're going to start off with this one. So European regulators are now forcing companies to spend more on cybersecurity than ever before. And there's three major regulations converging across the European Union. There's NIS2, which came into enforce in October 2024, DORA, Jan 25, and the Cyber Resilience Act, which comes into enforcement in 2027. Now, does that wave of mandatory spending create real opportunities for startups, or does the compliance money flow directly to the larger incumbents by default?
Happy to start. I think the obvious answer is that enterprises who buy from large platforms like Palo Alto, Checkpoint, CrowdStrike, if they can and they have an easy solution to buy, they will almost always go with that large platform. So the vast majority of spend will likely go to the bigger players. My opinion is that the opportunity for the startups and for the rest of the market is where there are capabilities that the large platforms haven't been able to offer yet. And let's be honest, those are many. There's a lot of things where they haven't been able to innovate yet, they're not there, and actually they'd rather wait for a company to emerge and then acquire them when they've built some great capability that enterprises are buying up. And that is often a very common route for how they build up their own product portfolios. And the second one, I would say, where the opportunity is actually how increasing compliance pressure impacts not just the enterprise, but also the mid-market and the SMB. And I think SMBs are very underserved when it comes to their cybersecurity and their compliance. And that's why we invested in a company called OneLead last year. They do security-first compliance for SMBs and scale-ups. And similarly, companies like Aikido that you mentioned before are also serving that long tail of the big world of SMBs. So for me, that's how I think about the opportunity from compliance.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, I guess at a high level, I don't love regulation as a tailwind for any business, in the sense that I think that their policymakers are almost always behind. And so your best bet as a startup is to recognize, as we were saying, new attack surfaces that probably aren't actually directly covered in the mandatory kind of constraints imposed by policymakers. They may well be, but that wouldn't be how I would be thinking about what I should serve. I would be looking at what are the current capabilities and the new capabilities that are emerging, what are the new threats that you only know because you are building AI-first, workflow-oriented agentic systems, and then looking to solve the emerging security problems on the back of that. I think the regulation will catch up with that, and then hopefully you've got yourself to a point where you are a larger company at that point, and you will get proportionally more of the flow. And I think to your point, there's also a lot of value, I guess, more broadly in the ecosystem. People are thinking about kind of this transition to where it's services as a software. So for your kind of smaller businesses that maybe don't have the in-house capability, how you actually build and allow them to kind of employ top grade security systems. What would previously maybe have been seen as a consultancy can now often be done in a slightly more software-like way. So I think that's how I'd be thinking about it, and then I'd be looking to earn my keep rather than worrying about whether I get a trickle down from the larger players.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges for cybersecurity startups has always been, you're a small 5-person company, you're going into a company that's large enough to treat cybersecurity seriously, and you're kind of saying to them, well, we know you're not sorting your security out, but please, trust us 5-person company from Dublin or whatever like that. But actually, what we saw actually, a lot of our early cybersecurity companies, ironically, they managed to float both, because what they did was they really adopted a channel partner strategy with the big consulting firms and the service vendors and stuff. They wanted to provide the latest and cutting edge security software. They weren't developing in-house themselves, but they were very happy to do all the change management and all that boring stuff that startups hate doing anyway. Startups who work in cybersecurity are usually highly technical, love building product, and hate the boring nonsense of enterprise grade selling. So in a lot of cases where we've seen huge success is, the bigger players acting as a conduit, and to the exact point, in one or two of the circumstances, in actually probably the two most successful examples that we would have in the portfolio of, they worked with big consulting or they worked with somebody else, both of them resulted in acquisitions of the companies, because eventually the companies work so tightly together. And actually what's brilliant for the startups is not only do they end up in acquisitions, but actually the most recent one we had last year, a company called Get Visibility, when the company was bought by ForcePoint, the CEO became the chief group risk officer for ForcePoint globally, and the CTO of Get Visibility became the global head of engineering. So actually they kind of got their real wish to, you were talking about DeepMind and getting, the unlimited budget in Google. These guys who were passionate about cyber all their lives ended up in this big multinational, and now they have, ultimate resources to go and solve bigger problems than they ever could have done as a startup or scale up.
Interesting. I've not heard that story before, but yeah, there's so many end games for startups, isn't there, right? Yeah. And the next question is around AI-powered attacks. So AI-powered attacks are becoming more and more sophisticated. Around this time last year, AI-supported phishing campaigns represented over 80% of social engineering activity. On the flip side, AI-powered defense is growing more and more capable, especially with some of these really, really big models and the capabilities there. So does AI net out as a positive or a negative for cybersecurity companies, and where does it create the best opportunities?
I'll give this a shot to start. So I think what it does is it just increase the cycle, right, that already existed. I mean, cybersecurity is a kind of an attack and defense game, and it's a constant kind of chase between the two, with the attackers trying to get around the defenses and the defenses trying to keep up. What AI has done is accelerate both of that, not just in phishing, and I think phishing is almost the most obvious use of AI, right? Like, if you could already convince someone with some copy and pasted text, well, AI will do it better. And I think, you know, there's a huge amount of opportunity there. Broadly speaking, I think you can think about it as either you block access to specific services and you predefine that, right? And you have a kind of ongoing, and you view your governance and your observability from that lens. You try to block from the output of the model itself, which is sometimes more difficult because they're not deterministic systems, or you try to have a layer on top that's catching things faster, right? That's how you would broadly think about it. But I think some of the more interesting areas is a company in our portfolio called InnerWorks, who work with, who essentially try to leverage this accelerated attack and defense paradigm, where they are constantly offering reward basically around solving or hacking some of the hardest problems, and they immediately are then able to patch it. And so they find exploits and patch them before anyone else does, and they're leveraging the fact that then eventually, by using the best hackers in the world for this, they can train their own models to actually become the best models in the world at hacking, and therefore the best models in the world at patching. So I think there's a huge number of interesting areas to play here. I think the hardest is to, and where maybe there's the most like deep tech angle is actually around how do you enforce security when an LLM and an AI is intrinsically non-deterministic. And I think that's very interesting. I think the easiest is a tool use blocker in some description.
Yeah, I think in general, you know, what we have to remember about AI is, you know, it's not a technology trend, it's a technology wave. So like when we're talking about AI, it's kind of like talking about the internet. You know, in a couple of, everybody, well, actually does, maybe people of a certain age in this room will remember startup life where you had to put the word cloud in front of everything, you know? I think we've gone well beyond that point. I was talking to a founder in a cybersecurity startup last week, and I want to share this thought because I just thought it was brilliant. He said the impact of AI on cybersecurity is a little bit like the Fast and the Furious movies. You know, the stunts get more ridiculous, the cars get bigger and faster, but if you can't drive, you can't drive. And I think that's the thing, like, yes, you know, as you said, everything is, every attack is going to get a little bit better, every defense is going to get a little bit better. And like, God only knows where we're going to end up here, you know, satellites killing satellites or whatever. But I don't think that's, like, the reality is we're just living through a wave of technology evolution that's been faster than anything we've ever seen. But I think fundamentally, like you know, it's rare, like, we're talking about like the ability to execute cyber attacks and the ability to defend cyber attacks. There isn't a lot of like new cyber attacks. You know, we're talking about like being able to do phishing better and being able to do this thing. But like at the moment, you know, we haven't seen a change in how the attacks are done, just an ability to either execute faster or defend faster.
Yeah, things that, go ahead.
Well, I was going to add, I think the cat and mouse game is accelerating incredibly, as you mentioned, but actually even when you have a gap between the attackers and defenders, that doesn't mean the defenders move to fix that gap that quickly. Because the reason that your enterprises buy cybersecurity is not necessarily because they see, oh, we have a gap in our defenses. It's usually because there's some strategic driver that's actually making them have urgency now. And that's either regulation, it's customers asking for it, or it's some immediate PR risk that they've seen this happen at another company and it's gone really badly. And that means now there can be a gap. Even though you might have built the perfect solution to this enormous problem, people might not be ready to buy it if it's not one of those three reasons. So I think that's the timing question becomes really interesting here.
Yeah, the one qualification there is, I think, again, in an agentic workflow world, and you have prompt injection attacks, that's an immediate product risk, right? And I think that's one area that's slightly different to like your traditional SaaS era, where like if you find a new attack exploit against, say, Anthropic's newest model, well, I can undermine your entire product, and so you're directly attacking the very thing that's making that company valuable, rather than having to worry about the PR, et cetera.
Yeah, very true.
Thanks very much, gents. Next question, just conscious of time here, 5 minutes. Okay, we'll zip through these last two questions here. So European cybersecurity companies are overwhelmingly needing US buyers to reach mass scale, something we discussed earlier. We see this playbook over and over again where companies originate, for example, in the UK and Europe, and then they move to the US for that scale. Darktrace, Cambridge founded, listed on the LSE, snapped up by a US PE firm. Sneak, UK origin, expanded to San Jose, doubled revenue, now essentially US headquartered. 48% of Central and Eastern European scale-ups actually move their headquarters outside of their country of origin to gain access to deeper capital markets and international customers. Even Wiz, which everyone calls Israeli, technically is headquartered in New York. So can you build a global competitive cybersecurity business from Europe or the UK without effectively becoming, quote unquote, a US company?
What does it mean to be effectively a US company?
Headquartered in the US, so your top co maybe has moved to the United States of America. Maybe the vast majority of your workforce isn't there, but you are essentially a US incorporated company.
I don't think you need to flip your top co. I think you'll always have to have a presence in the US because it's your biggest market, and you're better off winning in the US and then coming to Europe, like I said before. But no to the you have to top go flip. I think that's a question we should be doing more in Europe to make sure that we can support them. It's often useful, but I don't think it's mandatory.
I think if your goal is to build a global generational cybersecurity company in your space, once you've found your initial product market fit and you're en route to building a big company, your founding team needs to be spending a huge amount of time, if not all their time, in the US. And I think that's just the reality, and that's something that we at Dawn spend a lot of time with our founders on, figuring out when is the right time to move, how do we move strategically, how do we bring the culture over in the right way, and how do we hire incredible talent over there. That's something we spend a lot of time doing, and I think it's really, really important.
I agree wholeheartedly. The big thing for me is I believe you can build the company here, but I believe you have to be, to your point, like you have to be where the market is. Like you can't, you can't just say, oh well, we're going to be a European company. You know, I mean, the EU AI or the EU Inc. Act is now going to make a huge difference to all that stuff. But like as a startup, you go where your customers are, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in. And the reality is probably for 90% of startups, the single biggest customer base for them is going to be in the US. I've built 2 businesses in the US, 2 businesses in Europe. I don't think I was advantaged either side, but I would say if I built a cybersecurity company, the reality is when it comes to scaling capital, it's going to be American. They're going to want you to have an American presence, an American company. So you can be principled and patriotic, and you can do that while also spending American money to make it happen. Like,
absolutely. So deeper capital markets, deeper pool, liquidity, deeper customer base. So Team USA. Last question here. I know we got 2 minutes. All right. So from each of you, one cybersecurity trend that will define the next 5 years, and that this room should be paying more attention to.
I guess it's kind of an AI trend that's going to have big impacts, all right? So user interfaces are going away, basically, all right? So it's going to be your agents talking to somebody else's agents. Salesforce, a couple of weeks ago, obviously, it went completely headless. So what they're basically saying is a database is going to exist over here. You don't need to log into Salesforce anymore to make that happen. Your agents can just talk to Salesforce. Sadly, that is going to create unbelievable opportunities in terms of phishing attacks and stuff and prompt checks and all that. So I genuinely believe that whole transition from front-end interfaces to agents working with other agents, you know, going from the old SaaS of software as a service to service as software creates so much bad actor opportunity that I think there's going to be some generational wealth built in that space.
Yeah, you obviously say companies going essentially headless. I mentioned Carter earlier were describing their product as if it was already headless. You know, and the Box CEO, Adam, has already said the same thing as well, so interesting. Sebastian?
Yeah, I mean, I think whoever can manage to enable the agents and the AI to function at its best, so, you know, fundamentally not get in the way while still creating and protecting that surface, I think is going to be what defines the next great cybersecurity company. I mean, the other bit on that is just better fundamental understanding of prompt injection, how these models work at a core level. I think you'll see a bunch of deeper tech cybersecurity companies coming out at that interface as well.
For me, it's the eternal cat and mouse game that we talked about has just accelerated massively, and being able to stay half a step or a quarter of a step ahead on that curve is super critical. And one of the areas that excites me on that front is threat intelligence and how you can just be that little step ahead. I think that's becoming even more important as things accelerate.
Fantastic. Well, team, thank you very much for joining me up here, and
thank you
very much to our audience as
Thank
well.
You very
thank
much.
you.
Thank you so much.